Hey guys, so today we're just going to do a little walkthrough of the garden and kind of figure out what all's going to happen in the future and what's going on right now. So you can see here the bluebonnets are starting to fade out, and I have these zinnias planted to come in and replace them, as well as the sunflower right here. And those guys will flower during the summertime, and that'll kind of be my summertime blooms. And then if you can see that there's just kind of been interplanted between all of the bluebonnets in the areas that they'll be able to grow into. I also have these coleus planted in here. They're little red guys. Those guys will bush out and kind of fill in these empty spaces between these already planted shrubs like the rosemary. And you can see here I have a snail problem, and that's what all of these little bite marks are on here, is a bunch of snails coming through during the nighttime and munching on my seedlings. I've been spraying triple action, and it's been working pretty good to control all the rest of the pests, and then I just need to get some snail bait to take care of those guys. Right here, I pinched the top of this guy to get him to branch out and actually femmed him instead, and so that's what that mutated foliage at the top is. You can see some poppy flowers there. Back end here, I've got 3 rows. I've got my fall blooming in the row closest. Next row is going to be the herbaceous flowering species, and the row in front of that is going to be my spring bulbs and the fig trees. You can see I've got some more sunflowers there. The one behind that is a chrysanthemum, and then there's poppies, the coleus, and then a bunch of zinnia seedlings all through there right now. Over here, they've got more sunflowers, and then I've also got some fall squashes, kind of like a butternut squash, planted underneath this peach tree next to those done daffodil bulbs. You can see the peach tree is doing really well, and all the fruit has started to swell and grow, and it has leafed out. Over here we've got that bed that we glyphosated and got ready for the corn planting, which has now sprouted and popped up, and you can see all the little corn seedlings throughout here. And we'll come through here later and thin these out to just 1 per spot. And there they are. Okay, and then next up is going to be the cucumbers, and the cucumbers had wind damage early on, and so that's why there's a tomato planted there in the middle of them, just in case one of them died or they all died, and then that guy could kind of fill in. What I've been doing is coming through and just kind of training these cucumbers up these tomato cages here, so that way we keep the leaves and the fruit off of the ground, as these cucumbers typically are pretty susceptible to fungal diseases and all that stuff, and if you can get them up off the ground, it'll keep a lot of that moisture away and keep them healthier. And you can also see that the tomato plant is not really interfering right now, so I'm going to leave it, but eventually I'm going to come through and remove it if these cucumbers stick around for long enough. Underneath here, you can see the first couple cucumbers being set, so there's one right there, and then each one of the plants has at least 1 or 2 on them, so we should see those start to swell up here in the next week or 2. The cucumbers I've always had issues with, and so I've got my fingers crossed that I'll get a good yield this year, but we'll see. You see these tomato plants are starting to see the margins of their leaves curl a little bit because of that excess nitrogen. But I think I've got these beds pretty well flushed, so hopefully they won't be nearly as bad as the 2 tomato plants up at the front. And the pepper's still, of course, loving it. That lunchbox pepper's a little nitrogen heavy, but all the rest of them I have been loving it. As you can see with that serrano back there. And then, so this is the Indian Cherokee purple tomato, and it is bouncing out a little. The dill definitely has bounced back. This guy has also started to bounce back. As you can see, I'm going to kind of look at this new growth up here. It doesn't look anywhere near as mutated or injured. The cilantro has bolted and started to go to flower, so I'm going to go ahead and let that go to flower, and then I'm going to probably rip all that out once I get these tomatoes ripened to make some salsa. So here's the first couple sets of tomatoes for the year. These guys here, the Cherokee purples here. I think the other ones are beefsteak, I think. I'm going to take a look at that beefsteak foliage, and you can see it's still a little nitrogen heavy due to this, like the curling of the leaf here. But you can see, like, this has got that level of toxicity, and then this is a little bit better, so hopefully we're going to really start to see healthy growth instead of this little bit nitrogen heavy injured growth. And you see this old foliage here has reached the final stages of nitrogen toxicity with like the full-on curling, and it looks burnt and crispy. And then on the inside of these on the inside of the leaf here, you can kind of see like some black spotting, and then that's going to be the necrosis setting in from too much nitrogen. And then the Cajun Bell back here has got lots and lots of fruit on it, and that's always been a prolific fruiting pepper for me, so that's a great option if you want a little bit of bell pepper type fruit and you don't mind a little bit of spice. The squash has been doing awesome. This Black Beauty zucchini right here has started setting fruit, and we're going to kind of go in here and try and find those. And there's a couple of them. And those guys, if you don't stay on top of them, they can get really big really fast, so make sure you're coming out and checking on those guys every day. I'm going to take these vines and just kind of train them off in different directions, and eventually this whole area right here will just kind of be covered in squash vines, I hope. And this is the straight neck squash. You can see it's got fruit and they're starting to grow out. I'll probably harvest these tomorrow. A couple more in there. It's a awesome way to get fresh vegetables, especially right now with all this going on. And so basically this black tarp here is there because eventually I'm going to be covering that with limestone for a xeric bed with all of those agave back there and all that. This pear tree has set fruit, and then this other pear tree they're both done flowering and they've set their fruit, and now they're starting to leaf out and grow. All of these fruit trees are eventually going to shade these beds out, and so eventually these beds will be moved to wildflowers or something like that instead of vegetables, but we've got about 3 or 5 years before we get there. So another thing I do with my fruit trees is I come through here and I remove any of these little sprouts coming out of the branches that are in the crotches like this one here, and any of the areas where they're overcrowded or anything like that. I just usually remove 1 or 2 a day, just kind of to try and get them to have proper structure and all that. And then if you just do a couple a day, then you won't stress the plant out, and you'll get the ability to kind of pick and choose your branching and all that. And it's going to be a lot smaller of a wound for the tree to heal than if you wait for them to all grow completely and then prune, and then you're going to wind up with these bigger scars that'll allow for longer healing times and then mean more chance for bacteria to move in. So I usually just 1 or 2 a day come through, pick off the ones in the crotches, any crowded areas and all that kind of stuff. I always only do a couple a day because, you never want to trip on your plant and break the whole thing, and then any branch is important. So, just do it slowly, a little bit at a time, every day. So these grapevines have set fruit now, and this is the oldest one. It's probably going to hang on to all of its fruit. The other are pretty small and might not hang on to the fruit this year, but you can see the foliage is also nice and pretty, and that's because we've been keeping up with our fungicide applications, which we've been using neem oil, and we've also been using Triple Action, which contains neem oil. It also has pyrethrins. It's going to keep any of our bugs off of our grapevines as well. And then this Blanc du Bois here had a really bad anthracnose infection last year, but you can see with this neem oil application, it has dramatically reduced that, and there's almost no signs of it anymore. And then make sure as you're coming through and checking your grapevines every day that you're training your shoots up and in between your wires, and then that's going to keep your grapes organized and make sure that you don't get fungal infections from crowding of branches and all that. Just make sure that they've got their own space to grow in and that they're oriented vertically. I'm going to try and tie this in here with using one hand. We'll see how this goes. And then, so some other things with grapevines, like I said, these guys are pretty young, and so these fruit clusters they have set down here, we might see them only set half of this fruit this year, and don't be worried about that. Like I said, they're young vines, and they're going to need some time to thicken up and be able to support having a full cluster load like that. This nectarine tree, same thing again, just kind of take a look at it, figure out what branches you want to keep and not keep, and start plotting which ones you need to remove. And then all of my fruit trees are done fruiting or done flowering at this point and have set fruit. And so now we're going to be using neem oil and triple action to keep pests and disease off of these guys as well. And then just kind of coming through, checking the branches, looking at the fruit. And usually want to thin these fruit out to only having one every 6 inches or so along the branches. This one just has these couple little clusters here and there, so I'm going to leave these little clusters and not worry about the 6-inch rule just because they've got such a small load this year. This grape cluster, you can see this is what I'm talking about. This guy right here has a full cluster set, and we'll see if he actually manages to grow every one of those grapes out or if he's going to drop half of them or what's going to happen with that. So some other things I did this year is I also went ahead and got a drone, which is fun, and I'm going to show you guys some footage of me trying to fly some aerial photography of the garden with that, and there's a little surprise at the end too, which is pretty entertaining. My orange trees here have started their spring growth and they're flowering one last time before the cool weather is all over, and I've been eating these mandarin quats pretty frequently. They're sour on the inside, sweet in the skin, which is kind of weird. And then over here inside my bonsai area, I've got my summer vegetable plants that I'm going to be coming through and transplanting once the squash is done. And if any of the other vegetables in the other garden are done, go bad on me or die, I've got those eggplants and such there. All right, here we go with the drone. So I'm horrible at flying this thing, so bear with me here. And you'll get to kind of see a aerial view of everything around me. I've got a Dairy Queen right there, which had me gain 5 pounds whenever I first moved in here. Walking across the street and eating Dairy Queen. So you can see that black tarp right there for that xeric bed, and then that L-shaped grass patch, and then over there, that is all going to be limestone along with the driveway, and so that's why that black tarp is just there left uncovered. I'm working on getting the limestone, but it's kind of hard right now with all of the virus stuff going on. And so we're just going to come down close, and we're going to look at our beds from above here. And you can see the grapevines growing into their trellis. You can see how that squash is going to kind of fill in all of that open area in there. And then over here you can see these tomatoes and how that hoop house that we had on them at the beginning of the season has really put those guys ahead of the rest of the bed. And so it's a great way to get an early start to your garden. And there I am flying my drone. You can see my cypress I've got over there, Arizona cypress planted out in a little wild-like bed. And then here's the fig trees in the flower garden. I'm going to go zooming around, and I almost crashed. And so let's gain some elevation. And we're going to go over here, check out my bonsai, and then we're going to fly back home and land, and we'll be all done. You can also see over there my spray where I did for showing where I want that. So again, that limestone is going to go around the side of the house, come through here, and then so that sidewalk is going to lead to that limestone path, which will lead to another sidewalk around the side of the house. There's my bonsai trees. Alright, let's try and make it back home. Here we go. Let's not hit this pole here. And oops. Okay.